All right, Trey, you've got to tell me this. What is the single biggest difference when it comes to fitness for, let's just say, a general athlete, someone who's very athletic, maybe doesn't have one specific sport they're into, but is considered just a general athlete versus someone who is, let's say, in motorsports, because you're really into motorsports. That's your niche. What is like the number one biggest difference between the training that you do for those two types of athletes?
I think it might actually surprise you a little bit. Drivers are nerds. They love having data. They want to know all the numbers on everything they're doing. They want to know the metrics. They want to know, they want to track everything. They want to see what their baselines are compared to where they're at in the future. They want data. They're nerds. Whereas the normal athlete just wants to feel like they're getting better. All these drivers, they want to see it. They want to see the numbers.
That's wild. But it also kind of makes sense because they're spending so much time reviewing data to see, do I need to get off the brake sooner? Do I need to turn in more? Looking at some of the data from the car. So I guess it kind of makes sense. Data people like data. So that's interesting. Now, let me ask you this. To me, I used to race cars, race supermotos. So very familiar with what gets sore and what gets banged up and where the areas were to be optimized. Seems like with motorsports specifically, it's more of a core that we're looking at. We're focused more on core. Or is that not really true?
Yeah, core is big. If you're looking at the main differences between a driver and maybe a football player or a baseball player or something like that, there's two really big differences that you'll see. One is the neck. Drivers have to have, just ridiculously strong necks. There's a lot of sustained G loads that they've got to face, and the neck works not only to basically hold their head up, but it also stabilizes their vision and then protects them in the case of an impact, protects them from an increased risk of concussion. So neck is huge. And then also when it comes to the core, the biggest thing with that is the core has got to be strong, but the breathing muscles also have to be able to breathe into a compressed thorax and a activated core, which is something that athletes in other sports really don't have to deal with at all.
That's a good point. By the way, guys, we're here with Trey Shannon. He is the program director at PitFit in Charlotte, North Carolina. And in the home, I would say, I call it the home of motorsports. You got JGR there. You've got a lot of people. Would you agree with that title, or am I giving that title to you? Or that is the title, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. Mooresville, North Carolina, which is right up the road, is called Race City, USA, right? But yeah, most of NASCAR is based here. All the teams are based here. NASCAR headquarters is in downtown Charlotte. And then you obviously have Indianapolis, which is your other home of motorsports here in the US. And that's where our other location is. So you mentioned earlier that you thought I was in Indianapolis. That's probably why, because our other PitFit location is over there.
That was it. Yeah, because I did my research and due diligence before we jumped on this, and that was exactly what it was. Because I was like, why? Because my brain does definitely do some odd things, and I put some. You think that you're right all the time, and oftentimes you realize that it's just the story that you're believing that isn't always true. As a mental performance coach,
you were closer to right than you think. PitFit's been around for 20 years in Indianapolis, and PitFit Charlotte has only been around for a little over a year. Gotcha.
Okay. Very cool. So I work with a pro golfer, and I couldn't wait to ask you this question because we kind of are stuck. And I know that you're more into, the physical fitness side, but obviously there's a nutrition piece that goes with it. And I know you're not maybe specifically a nutritionist, but I think this is going to be something that you'd offer some really interesting insights on, especially with your background with these longer 24-hour type races that you've competed in yourself, right?
Yeah. I've done 7 of those.
7?
Yeah.
Just 7?
Just 7. Yeah. Seems to be a nice number. I don't know. 7 seems to be a special number somehow.
It is a great number. So what's interesting is so I know that there's systems for you to consume liquids, and obviously you can put things within those liquids. How do you recommend an athlete who's doing more of a longer endurance type, let's say just to give you a little more clarity, maybe I'm talking selfishly, I'm thinking more of like my golfer. So let's call it 18 rounds, probably what, I don't know, 5 hours, whatever the math is, depending on how the pace is. What are your thoughts on this idea of gluconeogenesis and glucose levels? Because obviously, if you have an athlete that consumes a certain amount of food early on and tries to fuel their body with a lot of calories, there's going to be like a spike depending on, of course, what they eat, and then they might fade out. And I just feel like with the golfer that I'm working with, sometimes, in the later 3/4, the last quarter of play seems to be, we're a little concerned as to what do we do to keep the hunger down, and what do we do to keep the vibes high and keep the stomach quiet, but without having some sort of glucose spike. How do you manage that with your athletes?
You said a couple of the magic words there, right? And I think the biggest thing is 5 hours, 5.5 hours. That's a long time to go without eating anything, especially for an athlete, that is performing in their sport, even if it's golf. I mean, the energy expenditure in golf, I think, is extremely underestimated and undervalued. So, for something like that, we would try to focus on making sure he doesn't get hungry, right? So make sure there's some protein and some fat in whatever he's consuming. It doesn't necessarily have to be a solid food. It's something he can put in a water bottle, right? And that's what we'll use. That's what we'll use with our drivers a lot. Is we'll typically put in a solution that is going to be glucose heavy, carbohydrate heavy, because that's going to be their primary source of energy as they're going through that activity. But making sure that they have a little bit of protein to keep their that sensation of being full, or keeping away the sensation of being hungry. You don't necessarily want to be full, but keeping away the sensation of being hungry, and then a little bit of fat to balance out that glucose spike that you're thinking of. Because when you have a high glycemic intake, you essentially get that glycemic spike. So what you can do to balance that out is put some protein and fat in there to make sure that it doesn't create that just boom cliff.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, because it's very real. I mean, I know with me, at one point I thought I might have been a diabetic or something. I actually I was like, all right, who do I know that's a diabetic? I'm like, oh, Eric Block, guy who him and I used to, he was my mechanic, but also my number one competitor when I was expert supermoto. And I said, hey man, I'm fasting. I need to know like what my glucose levels are. I think I'm a diabetic. So I'm going to come over, I'm going to load myself up, and then just going to keep pricking myself for like half the day at your house. Is that cool?
Let's see what happens.
Let's see what happens. Because as a former optometrist, eye doctor, usually I treat 95% of my problems. Like I had an MCL injury. I'm like, I can wing that one. If I have some dermatology stuff, I do my best, but without anesthesia. Some of the things I've been doing lately are a little bit too graphic. But, I try to take care of my own body. I always feel like I'm on my own best advocate. But it's interesting because the whole gluconeogenesis and the glucose, it's very real. And then what's also fascinating, and I don't know if you know this, I bumped into this recently, is that the brain consumes 20% of your glucose stores. And I'm like, really? And it was interesting because I said, is that why back in the day when I was taking long exams for like, an hour and a half, 2 hours, maybe even 3. Is that why I felt so exhausted after? And so you start to realize that there's this whole internal game of not just the mental game that I focus on, but this game of managing nutrition, managing sugar, and then, managing recovery. I mean, how do you manage an athlete? I mean, because it's got to be a different type of workout, I would imagine. I mean, let's say, for example, I'm a motorsports athlete. I'm not competing maybe 24, maybe something a little less aggressive, typical race weekend for an auto driver, how do you manage the fitness leading up to it and also after it? Because, I mean, there needs to be some degree of recovery, but how do those two pieces look different?
Yeah. So you talked a little bit too about how the brain uses 20% of the glucose stores. And that's one of the areas that we focus on a lot in terms of making sure everybody's body is efficient. So the more efficient, the more fit they are, the more efficient they can be. And racing is much more mental than it is physical, especially over a long duration race. And and when I say mental, I mean mostly on the cognitive, the cognitive demands. There's also definitely psychological demands. And you probably know as well as anybody that being more physically fit can actually help with emotional response control and stuff like that too. But with creating a more fit athlete, then we can now make it so that their body doesn't need as much of that energy that their brain can then go and use when it really needs it late in a race, something like that. So that's, during the off season, we try to, people always talk about building that engine. We want to make an efficient engine. I mean, a really efficient engine. So that's our main goal during the off season. And then during the season, you talked about going, preparing for a race, but then recovering after. That's huge. And we want to make sure that during the season, they're not getting overworked. Right. So when it comes to preparation and recovery, we'll taper their load as they go into a race weekend. And then coming back from it, that first day back, they're just, they're doing a cardiac output exercise, whether it's a single exercise or a circuit or something like that. The goal is put them in that like 120 beats per minute to 150 beats per minute range where they're getting good blood flow and they're activating the muscles that had been fatigued over the race weekend, but it's purely recovery as the goal. I mean, that's the only thing we're doing day one after a race is you're in recovery mode. We are not coming in here lifting heavy. We're not coming in here and doing, sprint intervals or something like that. We're in recovery mode that first day back. And it depends on the driver. Some we may take 2 days and then really work them hard like that third day, and then try to give them some sort of, central nervous system stimulation before they go back off to the race.
Mm-hmm. All right. I like that. And what I want to do is oval back to something that you said at the beginning of this. See how I did that?
Not circle back, but oval back. I like it.
Exactly.
I got you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming this is how you guys in Charlotte talk. So I'm just trying to connect you here. I mean, that's all I'm trying to do. So you had talked about, and I would love to hear a little bit more about, maybe expand upon the actual numbers and the data. I mean, because with myself as a mental performance coach, it's really tough to quantify. It's like there's not really other than results. And sometimes maybe vibe. And then maybe, I've been trying to come up with some sort of data. So I've been also dancing between like this intention and execution ratio, and just trying to think of ways that I can quantify change, quantify success, so I can start to identify what's working and what's not, where the opportunities lie. So ovaling back to what you had said earlier, what are the numbers that are important? And maybe what are some like the vanity metrics that don't matter? I mean, I sometimes, like the other day, I had my personal best on the flat bench, but I'm like, I still got a gut. Really doesn't matter. I mean, like I'd be better off not doing flat bench and just not eating for a week and then drop like 10 pounds, but tell me more about the metrics that have meaning to you.
Well, for one, don't sleep on anecdotal data. I personally find it very important, and we definitely do use it. We use feedback from our drivers after they come back from a race, and that is important. That's not to be discounted. But at the same time, like you said, it is important to get actual data that you can analyze, actual numbers. So what we do is we actually have a brain endurance training program that we use here. It's called SOMA, and we'll use that as our brain endurance. And then we also have the Synaptech systems to use with the more like the quick response type stuff, shorter duration. So all of those, they give us the numbers, right? They give us data as we go along. And especially with SOMA, what we have is we can do pre and post training program data. So they make sure we set baselines. You go through the program, you review those baselines again at the end. Same with the Synaptech. Whenever anybody comes in here, day one, they get a postural assessment, they get a performance assessment, they get a neurocognitive assessment on the Synaptech machine. So we'll test 10 different visual-based neurocognitive skills on that. They all get a baseline, and then we can retest that as needed to make sure that they're actually improving, see areas that maybe if we're focusing on, X, Y, and Z, maybe Q, P, and R are, dropping a little bit, and we then want to refocus a little bit more energy on those. But we make sure we have baselines for everybody with all of these things before we just, before we start developing anything.
Mm-hmm. Have you bumped into one thing that I thought was interesting, and I think it was more and I wonder if it was more their marketing and more some of the pretty colors and the little whistles and dings and God knows what else. But there was a company that reached out to me that had a focus band that you wore around your head. Have you delved into that arena at all as far as like managing focus using technology, or have you not gone down that road yet?
We don't necessarily do that here at PitFit. But actually there is somebody here in the Charlotte area that if I feel like anybody needs that, there's somebody I can send them to. So she does like neurofeedback, brain mapping, that kind of stuff. And actually, manipulating the different frequencies of brainwave that we have, whether you're looking at, what is it? Alpha, beta, and,
Delta.
like there's
Alpha, beta,
there's
beta?
something. Yeah, there's something else in there, but
Gamma.
yes, gamma. That's the other one. So it's called Mental Edge Fitness Solutions, I think, and they're right down the road here in Cornelius, and they can do that kind of stuff. And if I feel like somebody is in need of that, then I'll send them over that way. But yeah, it's not something that we necessarily have the technology or, to be frank, the expertise to get too far into. I mean, that is true neuroscience, and it's something that we can potentially add in the future. But within the scope of what we practice now and what our capabilities are, that's just a little bit outside.
Yeah. Have you bumped, just out of curiosity, into any of the work of Dr. Andrew Huberman, or no?
Yeah, very familiar with Andrew Huberman. Yeah, absolutely. I listen to his podcast, once every couple of weeks to make sure I'm keeping current with what kind of stuff he's putting out there.
Yeah, he's definitely he's been crushing it lately. I mean, he just popped onto the scene. I think it was, maybe a little less aggressive popping onto the scene than Andrew Tate, but he definitely he definitely came out of nowhere, and just all of a sudden he seems everywhere. I don't know if it's the YouTube algorithm just recommending him to me, and I'm a victim of the algorithm, but gratefully, and thankfully, there's a lot of knowledge that he shares. Has there been anything that you've learned from him from a neuroscience standpoint that you've applied into your program that's been useful?
Yeah, it's changed a little bit the way we approach like heat or cold therapy, if we do want to use any of that, and the general effects that has, neurologically. That's, in terms of what we do here, that's probably been the largest, like the largest influence that he's had. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely with heat, with temperature manipulation and what it does for the body. Nice.
So you are working with a variety of athletes, many of whom have had great success in motorsports. And I'm really curious, obviously don't use any names because we don't want your shop to close down, anytime soon. But what's the difference between the guys that are crushing it and you're like, you can almost tell like that guy's got it? Because I know with me, I've got my clients that I work with on the mental performance coaching side that I know are going to get there, but it's going to be a slow, long road. And I have the other guys where I'm like, wow, man, if you just give me a little bit more trust, a little more time, a little more attention, I can get you places that you probably don't even think you can go. What's been the difference that you've seen yourself between the guys that you've worked with and gals and they, thems, and others? I still don't understand that.
All of them, everybody.
Everyone, yeah. I want to be inclusive here. Pets, whatever, fish. When you're working with someone, what do you think is really the main, like taking a step back from fitness, taking a step back from your world? Because you're a really smart man. You look at things in a different way. You've got an engineering background. What do you see as being the main core differentiator, maybe even a couple things that you want to share between the great and the good?
Yeah, man, there's Oh, this is something I've thought so much about too. So I actually have a pretty long answer for this one. So bear with me for a couple minutes here, because we're going to go into a few different areas. We're going to kind of
I
jump
love
around a
it.
little bit. We're
Like it.
definitely going to jump around. So
Let's do
one,
it. My pot roast isn't done for 43 more minutes. I hear the steamer beeping. I'm like, do we really need this many beeps? Like, it says 44 minutes on the front. Like, I'm good. I don't need
yeah,
this like
man,
beep every 10
I
seconds.
almost want to make a couple of notes real quick so that I don't forget what each different bullet point I want to hit on here. But
Well, if you want, I can
let's
sell you a
start.
copy of this video when we're done with it, because I'm going to have it in audio and video form for $7. I mean,
Oh,
can't go
perfect.
wrong.
Yeah, give me two. Give me two.
Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
So and I'm going to put these in no specific order. So one of them is going to be their brain works on just a different level, to be honest. Like when it comes to how quickly their brain is capable of processing things, how quickly signals go from their eyes to their brain and a response is created. The really, really high level drivers, they are on a different level. I've got a couple in here that we talked about the Snap Tech machine a second ago. I've got a couple that the standard drills that are on there were too easy and they had to create their own. Like
Wow.
literally had to create their own. We bring other people in, they can't even get, half of the full score that what the people who create them can get. Like brain just works on a different level. And that goes as far as, perception, peripheral vision, a lot of different elements go into that. But when it comes to just sheer brain processing speed and how much information can come in, get absorbed, processed, and a response created, it's a lot quicker for the guys and girls that are really at top level. The second is, and these aren't mutually inclusive. There's some people, they have one, but maybe not another, and something like that. And stepping away from fitness and maybe into your world a little bit here, I've noticed that the guys and girls that are really, really top level, they're capable of practicing self-compassion. They are not, punching themselves in the face when they do something wrong, when they make a mistake. I call it I always refer to it as like the Eli Manning trait. Like if I asked you who was a better quarterback, Peyton Manning or Eli Manning, you're going to say Peyton. Everybody's going to say Peyton Manning. But Eli Manning has the same number of Super Bowls. You know why? Because he forgets that he makes mistakes. He just keeps on going. He'll throw an interception. You go and ask him what happened on the sideline. He's like, I don't know. I'm focusing on what we're going to do next. So, his ability to practice self-compassion was I think one of the things that made him a 2-time Super Bowl winner. And I can see when really talented drivers come in here and they're capable of doing that, then they're going to perform really, really well. So that's the second. The third, they are at the same time always trying to improve. That doesn't necessarily mean they're getting on themselves about the performance they just had, but no matter what, they could have just won the race, and they're in here trying to get better. They're in here trying to get better. They're trying to get better at the sim. They're trying to get better on the sim. They're reviewing data. They're practicing their imagery work or whatever it is they're doing with, if they're working with a mental coach, like they're constantly trying to get better. And they're very curious about it. They want to know why we're doing this. They want to know why we're doing that. They're very curious about all these things. Anybody who just does what I say, I'm like, well, you're going to go maybe this far, but you're not going to go all the way to the top. And maybe they still will. There are guys and girls that their talent level just transcends everybody else's, and they can get to certain places just based on talent. But, imagine how much farther they could have gone if they were more curious and more hungry and practice self-compassion a little bit better and all that kind of stuff. I would tell you, the ones that are just supreme talents, they're the ones that their brain works on a different level. Like that one is pretty much across the board. Like if they're, regardless of all the other things, if they are just straight up talent, their brain's going to be on another level. So yeah, those are probably the three biggest that I see outside of, them being fit, is brains on another level. They know how to practice self-compassion, and they're always very curious and trying to continue getting better all the time.
I love it because, it's interesting. One of my current athlete that is on the maybe steepest trajectory, we'll say, loves to challenge me. And it was so funny. The first time it happened, it wasn't that I was against it. It was just so unfamiliar to me. And then I like had this odd moment where I was like conflicted because I'm like, all right, this guy's crushing me, but this is what I do. But then, and at first I was kind of like, oh geez, did I say something wrong? And then within like 2.5 seconds, I was like, why am I so excited about this?
Yeah. He wants to know. Yeah.
This is great. We're having a conversation. I'm not always right. Ask my girlfriend. I've only been right twice. I've only been right twice in 7 years. Twice. So if I'm coaching,
hey, that's a good average. That's pretty solid.
In a relationship, it is. Certainly not with a client. But what was interesting is I love how you say that because he's so passionate to become better that to your point, he questions me, but it's, think about questioning, if someone questions you and it's your wife being like, well, where were you last night? That's a different type of question than is like, wait a minute, you're telling me I did this, but like, I don't think I did that. That's a different type of question.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, all right, let's look at your perspective. I always like to think of like a pyramid, I call it like the perspective pyramid, where you've got maybe your perspective at the base of the pyramid, and then you challenge yourself to look at things from a completely polar opposite perspective. See if you get where you need to go. See if you gain some knowledge, some clarity. And then if not, maybe think of like how your idol or someone you look up to that you would look to for advice might look at things. And you have like these 3 different ways of looking at things. It gives you just a different perspective on things so that you can maybe see things in a different way through a different set of lenses and see if maybe there's something you missed. And so I love that you said that.
I don't wear glasses. I only have
don't.
Only one set of lenses. They're clear.
Well, when you're an eye doctor, I think you're basically like destined to have glasses. Plus, I've gotten to that point where there's a place down the road that is really like amazing food. You ever come out my way to Connecticut, which there's absolutely no reason for you to come here. But if you do, there's a place down the street, and it's so funny because I usually wear my contacts there, and I'm at the point where I can't read the menu. So I always look at the bartender and I'm like, we're friends, right? She's like, yeah. I'm like, I've told you before. I'm like, I have to order the same thing. I have no choice. I don't know what's on. I don't know this thing, this piece of paper. I don't even know if there's even writing on it, but anyways, so
might as well be a picture.
Exactly. Yeah. So another thing that was really interesting that you said, and I was super excited when you said it, you used one of my words. I'm all about personal philosophy. So for me, my personal philosophy, I like to come up with 3 words that have meaning to me. And the reason why it's important to me is if I'm ever stuck, bored, bummed, challenged, whatever, even if I just want to excel, I'm not going to say it's all negative. Even if I want to try to figure out a way to be better. So I'm on the uptick. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling the vibe and I want to uptick. I always like to lean on my personal philosophy, which is always, to me, 3 words that I hold as being very valuable. They're almost like core values for me. And it was interesting that you said this, but so mine is be kind, be curious, and be creative. So when you said curious, that really resonated with me because it's so true. If you just, you could build a brand and a business off of curiosity. You could build a career off of curiosity. And it's just interesting because I hear these athletes. I don't know about you. Have you ever listened to any of the I'm addicted to 2 things, Chipotle and post-race interviews. Have you paid much attention to post-race interviews in any sport?
First of all, Moe's over Chipotle.
We're editing this out. No way.
No, we're keeping it in.
You're going to keep the algorithm, dude.
But
My channel's going to get canceled. No way. No.
Unless there's a sponsorship involved and I'm like stepping on here. I definitely Moe's over Chipotle. But
Wait.
yes,
I'm
my
gonna come
answer
over to
is
talk to
yes.
you. I know why you like Moe's, because they give you so much darn attention when you walk through that door. Don't let that fool you.
It's the tacos, man. They're just better.
In your defense, I have not tried the tacos, so I will not be. Let me breathe through my belly for a sec.
There you go.
Give me a second.
That,
Or wait, you know what? Andrew Huberman, physiological sigh. You like it?
there you go. Yeah. Get that phrenic nerve.
Pursed lips. So it's a stacking one big breath with a little on top of it, and then pursed lips on an exhale. Boom. You know what, dude? Maybe you know what? I'm curious as to whether Moe's might be a better option than Chipotle. Yeah, wow, exactly. Look what just happened. We just saw real-time transformation. Anyways,
glad I could help. But to answer your question, yes, I love post-race interviews. I love them. I want to know what people have to say, and I want to know what people are thinking after a race. And yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and so I want to ask you something in a moment, but just to bring it full circle to make the point is, I personally, because I have an amateur program that I use because my one-on-one stuff, my direct contact with athletes is a little more expensive, so it's not in everyone's price range. So I have a group that I do on Monday nights and also Tuesday around 11 o'clock for my people in Europe that are part of it. And in the on season for Supercross Motocross, because it's a very niche Supercross Motocross group, we'll review half of our time as a learning lesson. The other half is reviewing some of these post-race interviews. And what's interesting to me is very rarely do you hear much curiosity. And to your point, you made a great point earlier, which is self-compassion. It's almost like they want to beat themselves up. And there's in my theory is that if you beat yourself up in front of someone else, it's so that they're like, oh, wait, Trey, listen, I know, no, Trey, wait, here's some, here's some food, here's some brownies, here's some here's some love, here's some attention, let me, so it's almost like you're playing the victim role. And also I find that everyone blames their suspension. Everyone said, this is my, let me give you my, here, ask me how my race was.
Jay, how'd your race go today?
Trey, we didn't get the result we were hoping for. We're going to regroup and, we're going to take the positives from this. Yeah. Good luck.
You forgot, come back out and execute next time.
Yeah. We're going to come back, execute. And,
you got to execute. It's important.
And also now that I think about it, I couldn't get comfortable on the bike. Now, I don't think it was because I'm stressful and anxiety, and I have anxiety and I haven't managed that well. And therefore my inputs with my hands and my grip strength aren't maybe changing the dynamics of how I'm interacting with my bike and what's happening underneath it. But now that I'm getting curious, maybe that is it.
So you actually just mentioned something that I think is the fourth trait, let's say, that really defines a high level performer, at least what we see with our drivers in here. And you talked about, basically adapting to the bike. The really, really high level guys and girls are adaptable. I mean, they're 100%. They're all adaptable. I mean, look at one of my favorite examples is if you look in F1 and cars everybody's got a slightly different car, right? Everybody designs a new car every year and it's all made to the same formula, but everybody's got a different car. It's not a spec series. And I'm sure this is similar in Moto too, where, everybody's on different factory bikes and you'll see some riders mesh well with certain bikes. Some riders don't. And same in F1, you see some drivers, they have trouble getting on top of a new bike or a new car as quickly as maybe their teammate or something like that. But you see guys like Max Verstappen or Eli Tomac, they're fast on anything. You put them in anything, on any bike, in any car, and they're fast because they're adaptable. The really, truly great drivers, riders, competitors in any sport are adaptable.
God, I love that. It's so true. And you know what's so funny? I think people need to watch out for simplicity. Simplicity can be your friend, but it also can make you not notice the value of something to the value that it should be appreciated, because you're absolutely right. And, if you follow moto, I mean, I'm branching out from motorsports and looking to get it more into tennis and golf and baseball and all that. But I will say that with my hyper focus and of knowledge and awareness of the players in supercross and motocross, you see so often that there's guys that just don't, I don't know. They don't adapt, and the first person that comes to mind is someone like a Ken Roczen, and you see in motocross and supercross, they're always chasing suspension settings. But I can tell you this, because I've researched this, is that most of the guys that are chasing a setting, what they do is they start here with a setting that's recommended by the team. Maybe another athlete on the team has done well with it. And then they say, well, it's not working for me, not working for me. Let's try this. Let's try that. Let's try. And then before you know it, guess where they end up? Right back
where they started. Yep.
It's almost like a guarantee,
Yeah.
If there was a stock, I would have tens of thousands of dollars that I don't have all in on it. And I would just go all in. And so what's interesting is, I know we're getting off of what your expertise is in, but this is just Trey and Jay talking. Oh, hey.
I still love this shit. I mean,
all right, good.
I love it.
You're with me on this. All right. Trey and
100%.
Jay, dude, that'd be a good, some sort of brand there. Maybe frozen yogurt, Trey and Jay.
Yeah, absolutely. I dig frozen yogurt. I'm there for it.
Yeah. Because Sweet Frog, I'm a little bit the sweet part I got, but then the frog, I'm not a fan of frog. Frogs are all right, but I don't know. Ayahuasca, isn't that what they use them for? I don't know. Whatever. Anyways, but so when it comes to adaptability, and you know what's interesting is I'm having this conversation with you, not knowing even where I stand on it, but I want to explore with you on this and be curious about your response to it, and even where my mind goes with it. What do you think? I always like to look at things two ways. I like to look at things where I say, well, what promotes adaptation and adaptability? And what is the thing that is restricting it or causing the resistance to people to being adaptable? What are your thoughts on both of those angles?
Man, I don't know if I've looked at it that way before.
I'm not looking for a right answer. I'm looking gut. Give me gut.
No, I'm just thinking. So what could restrict? I think what could restrict somebody from adaptability is like an expectation, right? If you have a specific expectation of what it should be or what it is supposed to be, you're not going to adapt to what it actually is. And then the counter side of that, what facilitates adaptability, I think, is creativity. Is, you don't have that expectation. You're just going in to try to make something. You don't know what you're going to make, but you're going to make something. And before you know it, you've made chicken salad out of chicken shit. So, I think that's
I love it.
If you have a specific expectation, you're going to limit adaptability. Whereas if you're going in with no expectation and you're just trying to be creative, or just have that open mind, there's where your adaptability comes from. And it's super funny because I saw this analogy. I can't take credit for it. I wish it was mine because it's good. I don't know if you know who Derek Daly is. He used to race in Formula One and IndyCar back in the 80s, 90s, and his son races in IndyCar now. But he's a very well-respected opinion when it comes to motorsports. And he said there's two types of drivers. And he was talking in the context of how to build an F1 team, and you want to have one of each of these types of drivers. But it really struck a chord with me when I read it. And I was like, man, this is really genius. The two different types of drivers are the feel sensitive driver who needs to try to dial in everything to his or her liking, right? And that's what they kind of come. But if they're good at it, they start here and they go, all right, this is optimal. And they find it, right? So the feel sensitive drivers, and I'm sure there are feel sensitive riders as well. You know, sounds like Ken Roxon is that kind of style where he needs to feel right on the bike to perform at his best. So you have your feel sensitive drivers, and then you have your instinct reflex drivers who they're like, give me the car, I'm going to drive it. And they adapt to what the car gives them. And they perform no matter how it is. Now they may not be able to they'll get the optimum of what that car is set up for in the moment, but they may not be able to get that car's true potential because they don't know they're not sensitive enough. They don't feel it well enough to get it to its optimum, but they're always at their optimum because they're going to adapt to it. Right. And he said the most deadly driver, the Lewis Hamiltons, the Max Verstappens, the Michael Schumachers, they're both.
Oh, I didn't see that one coming.
They're both.
Ooh.
They can adapt to an ill handling race car, or in, Moto's case, an ill handling bike. But at the same time, when they come off the track or even during the race, they're telling their crew, they're telling their engineers how to tune on it to make it even better for them. But at the same time, they're adapting to what it is now. They know that they can make it better. They'll work on making it better, but they also know how to adapt to drive it the best that it possibly can be driven in the moment. And I'm sure there are guys like that on bikes as well that'll do the exact same thing, where they'll adapt to what it's giving them, but then they're going to go and they're going to make it better. And there's some guys that can only do one of those. There are some guys that can only adapt, and then they have no idea what to tell the engineers, what to communicate to the engineers to make it better. And then there's some that only know how to communicate to the engineers to try to make it better, but they don't know how to wring every last little inch, every last little hundredth of a second out of it when it's not optimal, And the guys that are the guys, girls, the fish that are the best of the best, they do both.
Oh my God, I love it. Because if you think about it, the adaptable person, I mean, as I was listening to you, I love what you just said. I think it's brilliant. As I was listening to, I envisioned the adaptable athlete moving in a positive direction, dropping their lap times, finding their turn-in points, maximizing their inputs and outputs, whatever you want to call it. They're improving while they're still knowing that there is something better, but they know that now is not the time to focus on what's better. Whereas the athlete that doesn't let go, and it goes back to what you said earlier about letting go, basically, right? Your emotional attachment is like, wait a minute, this isn't the way I want it to be. This isn't what I expected. This isn't what I predicted. And what happens is that athlete is almost like, I imagine like two different rubber bands. I imagine that super thick, not as wide rubber band for the person that can't let go, that tries to do better, and then they get sucked back. They try to do better, they get sucked back. But then that other person, it's almost like maybe they don't even have an elastic band. They have like an adjustable band where they're like, hey, I'm not breaking free from the fact that I know that I need less grip or I need more toe in, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. But in the like now's not the time when you think about, I'm going to grow and I'm going to do my best, and then I'm going to circle back to this when it's time. So I love how you said that. It's so true.
I didn't say it. Remember, I didn't say it. Derek Daly said it. I just read it and remembered it. And
he didn't
agreed.
say it to me. You did. No, I don't care about this guy. He sounds
Got to make
amazing.
Sure credit is where credit's due.
Yeah, he sounds amazing, and we'll give him credit. But I have not had sushi with him, and I have not hung out with him. I'm hanging out with you. So to me, like you're the guy who's bringing the information to me. So
sounds good. And I appreciate that you like sushi. So we're good on the whole Moe's Chipotle thing, as long as we can agree sushi is where it's at.
Yes. And I will also say that I went for happy hour sushi last week, and I went in like an odd time. I can't, I don't
like
care.
midnight, like what?
No, the other end. I know. I can't stay up till 9.
At 3:30. You went for 3:30 p.m. dinner.
3:30. I think it was exactly 3:30. Yes. So I walk in at 3:30, and I told my girlfriend, I'm like, hey, meet me there, because she was at her place. I'm at mine. I'm like, hey, let's meet for sushi. We'll do happy hour. Try to cut our price in half, because this place is so good. You just can't stop ordering. You like purge. So it was so cool because we walked in there, and then who did I bump into? My pseudo sister, my best friend in high school's sister with her husband, who this guy is the coolest of the cool. And then they bring their two even just as equally cool friends. And so my last sushi experience was half off, twice the fun, actually triple the fun, and had a great time. And I ate early enough. So by the time I went to sleep, I didn't go to bed with that full stomach where you got to like prop up like 18 pillows behind your head so you don't, have your stomach squash your chin.
I get it.
Whatever. Anyways.
I know that one. Yeah. I know that one, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. I do too. So I love that you have this pursuit for the mental game. So I kind of wanted to shift gears a little bit. See how I did that? Oval, shift gears. See? on the fly.
Making adjustments. I like it.
Yeah, I can adapt. If they don't have what I want on the sushi menu at half off, and that didn't make the item list, I struggle to adapt there, but otherwise I'm pretty good. So you've raced yourself. I want to ask you this. I'm very curious to see how you respond to this. Since we're going down the mental road, let's maybe stay there a little bit longer. And feel free to venture off into the physical if you'd like as well.
Okay.
I'm just curious. So when you compete yourself, and it's interesting because I, as a mental coach myself in real time. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've been like, okay, are you going to say this thing that you probably shouldn't say? Are you going to say it? And then I say, yeah, but at least I create the space and I think about it. I make the decision, and then I make that, and I say that thing that I probably shouldn't have said. With you, as someone who knows fitness, the mental game quite a bit, and you have this unique perspective where you have the knowledge and the experience where you can give the advice. But what's interesting is now all of a sudden it's like, hey, Trey, throw this outfit on, throw this helmet on, throw the gloves on. You're competing. What have you noticed are your biggest strengths in the car as a driver, and where do you feel you need to improve?
Oh, I love it. All right. So one of the things that I used to not be very good at that I feel like I've improved quite a bit, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm at the top by any means, but one of the things that I recognize as something that was important, and I preach a lot, so I made sure I practiced it as well, is the self-compassion. I used to be very hard on myself, extremely hard on myself. And it's funny because one of the things that happened very early on, and I think it took me a little while to really realize how big of a moment this was and how important it was. I was maybe like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old playing Pee Wee basketball. And I had a just awful game, like just complete shit game. And I was like 8. So what did it really matter? Right. But I had a terrible game, and I was supposed to be one of the stars of the team and all this kind of stuff. And, back when I had no idea that I was going to end up only being 5'5", and actually could play basketball, but had this terrible game. And my dad sees me like moping around. And, just for context, we lived in LA. So this was LA in the early 90s. And he comes up to me and he said, "What's wrong?" I was like, "That was terrible. It was a terrible game." "What do you mean what's wrong?" Like, I played awful. And he's like, "Yeah, dude, even Magic Johnson has off nights." And that thought that the best of the best have off nights had never even occurred to me. And so I was 8, so it didn't sink in totally at that point. But when I started racing a little bit later on, I would find myself like thinking back to that. Whenever I had bad race, I'm like, man, even Magic Johnson has bad games. So that just kind of like clicked, eventually. It didn't click immediately, but it clicked eventually that like, man, I can try my hardest to be at my absolute very best every single time. And it just isn't going to happen, dude. Like and that's okay. Like, that's fine. As long as you keep trying to be at your best every time and putting the proper practices in place to do it, you're going to be at your best more often than if you hadn't done all that other stuff. But you still have to be okay with the fact that you're going to have an off race. Like, it's going to happen. You can't be your absolute 100% best every single time. Otherwise, you're not maximizing your own skills. If that's the case, like you're at like 90% or 95% or something like that. So to me, practicing that self-compassion and being okay with, not being okay with, but moving on from a mistake in the car, I got much, much better at that as I progressed in my career. Not even progressed in my career, but did more and more of these 24-hour races, especially in a 24-hour race. Like, nobody can be perfect for 24 straight hours. Like, that's asking too much. That expectation is too high, right? You can't have the expectation of being perfect for 24 straight hours, especially if you're literally the one going for 24 straight hours, like no sleep, no rest, whatever. Like, you're not going to be perfect for that whole time. So I think understanding that is an area where I got much, much better at. In terms of still weaknesses, I don't know. I think it's tough for me to say, because one of the things I did have was self-awareness, and I did realize that my talent level just wasn't. I'm not gonna be a professional driver. Like, I realized that, and I've obviously found a way to make my impact on the sport in a different way and still have meaning and purpose. And I love being able to be in this role and still be a part of the sport. But I think as a driver, I always, not from the get-go, because obviously when you first start, like, oh man, I'm gonna do this. Like, this is it. Finally get to do what I know I'm gonna be the absolute best at. And then realizing, like, oh, okay, I'm good, but I'm not like great. So okay, no worries. I can still have fun doing this. I can still enjoy it. I can still find meaning and purpose in it. And I never really got to the point where I had to like really dig deep for a big weakness. But I think the biggest one in my past was that self-compassion, and is now one of my strengths.
Yeah, and it's huge. And what's interesting is, if you take, and I didn't even realize this until I was listening to you, is if you take self-compassion and you bring it, so the self-compassion that you're talking about is more like, hey, the 8-year-old version of yourself, hey, we go to this game, you're there for 2-3 hours, whatever the math is, the drive home, you get home, you're beating yourself up. And so it's like a matter of hours.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's stopping and thinking like, oh, maybe I should be more self-compassionate. What's interesting is if you take that self-compassion and then you shrink it down, and you shrink it down till it's that big, and you say, okay, I'm a basketball player. I just shot a 3 and we had momentum, right? So momentum for the last 29 seconds, got points, and here I am. And then the vibe of the team is good. We're finally shifting. We're about to start beating this team. We're about to completely shift the momentum. I take my 3. I literally am not even close. It's like there needs to be self-compassion in that micro slice of a moment, right?
And that's what I mean on track is like you dip a wheel, right? You in moto, you get a little squirrely going through the whoops or something like that, and you lose a second. You better have that immediate self-compassion, or you're losing more than just that second. You're losing 2 or 3 seconds because now you're thinking about it, blah, blah, blah. No, immediate self-compassion. And I also believe that for the people who are truly, let's call it mentally tough, right? The people that's what everybody loves to call it. Momentum's bullshit. So
I like it.
Why do you need momentum? Why is it necessary? Why do you need it? If you miss a shot, just come back, shoot the next one, right? Like if you miss an apex or a breaking point or whatever, like you just nail it on the next one. You don't need momentum. Like just do it.
It's so true. It's almost like a prediction error, right? It's like the disappointment comes because it's like, well, wait a minute, Trey. Like I'm looking back right now, and for the last 7 minutes, I crushed it. So how is it even possible in this minute moment right now that I'm not. It's like we're almost like we have I always say that we have an addiction to prediction, and the predictions that we make are always by looking back and then
Yeah.
projecting that forward, but that's actually not accurate.
Yeah,
You know?
I agree. And I think, like you said, if you just crush the last 7 minutes and then you make one tiny little mistake, why are you worried about that one tiny little mistake? Just keep going forward, crush the next 7 minutes. And that was something that I really tried to emphasize when I'm in the cart, myself, is it doesn't, one little mistake, you can't go back and fix it. So why worry about it? Although there was one moment, I always thought that I was somebody who drove better, like calm. And I think my level of fatigue had more to do with this than anything else, because it was like 20 hours into a 24-hour race, and I was getting pretty worn out. And somebody ran me off the track, like literally ran me off the track. And my brother was my strategist, and he was on the radio with me, so he knows me really well. And I come on the radio just fired up. I am MFing this guy that just ran me off the track. Oh, how are you going to run the solo off the track? What the? Yeah, just blowing him up. And my brother comes on the radio and he goes, "All right, buddy, calm down. It's all good. Like, we're still looking good. We didn't lose any spots. We got 4 hours to go. Just, get yourself settled back down." And about 2 minutes later, he comes back on the radio and he says, "Scratch that. Keep being pissed. You're going faster." And I think that was literally, I honestly think that was just my level of fatigue had gotten to a point where I hadn't dropped a lot of time, like maybe 3/10 of a second. But the adrenaline kick that anger gave me got me back to like an energy level that I could put that extra 0.2 back in. And then it, leveled back off again after a few laps. So I don't think it was necessarily an I drive better angry kind of thing. I think it was just the anger gave me a little bit of an adrenaline spike in that moment. But I just thought it was funny that had happened, because I definitely do drive better when I'm more calm. I don't drive better frustrated. I don't drive better angry. That's not a good headspace, I don't think, for anybody to be in. But yeah, I just thought that was a funny thing that happened. And I, because it goes against everything that I believe, or what, somebody like you would teach and all that kind of stuff. But, sometimes that kind of thing can happen.
Yeah. And what's crazy is, and because this topic resonates with me big time, especially right now. I have an athlete that I'm working with, and I try to get him angry because it's the only way that he becomes aggressive. He's extremely kind. He is a great human being. He's amazing. I love this kid. But when it comes to racing, he races like he's your friend. And I'm trying to get him to race like the guy you're racing against just killed and beat up your sister. And so what you start to realize is that with anger, it's still energy, right?
Yeah.
So anger is energy. And what's interesting in, I don't know if you've ever bumped into, and if you haven't, I'll send it to you, but my guess you maybe bumped into it, but there's a scale of an emotional scale, and it has the different emotions. So at the very bottom is guilt, shame. Well, it's actually, to be more appropriate, it's shame. Shame is the lowest. And then like guilt is maybe a hair above it, but not really. And then you have like shame, humiliation, embarrassment. They're all in this very low range, like 20 to 40 hertz, they call it, right? But what's interesting is, even if you go up to like, or you're near like hopeless or depressed, believe it or not, because the higher up you go, the quote unquote better the emotion, the more it serves you. Anger is actually, I remember the first time I saw anger on the scale, I was like, that's higher than I thought. And then I was like, wait a minute, if you're hopeless, you have no energy, you have no life, you're stuck to the couch.
Yeah.
You can't even get out of it. But if you're angry, there's at least, if someone's hopeless, anger does give you hope.
There's adrenaline there. Yeah.
Yeah. But it says that you got two roads. So you're angry. So you've got energy. Oh my God, this is great. You've got energy. Now what are you going to do with it? Are you going to self-destruct, or are you like, you know what? Fine. This person broke off of me because I'm not in good shape. I'm going to the gym for the next 3 weeks until I lose 20 pounds. Boom. We've all done that. I mean, I know with me, I look a hell of a lot better after a breakup. About a month after a breakup, I could probably model. But in a relationship, I look, it should be called relationship. Like I just grab me a bag of chips, grab me some popcorn, and, don't move me. I don't want to burn a calorie.
I don't know. I haven't dealt with a breakup in 17 years, so it's I can't remember what it was. I can't remember what I did.
All right. So most people go through a divorce in their life and all that. So I'm curious, and I'll share with you. I want to hear what you say, and I'm going to share something really interesting because I've got 2 good tidbits of knowledge on this. What do you think is the key to a great marriage?
I don't think it's too dissimilar from the key to, success in sport. One of those qualities we talked about, that curiosity, right? Because one of the things that my wife and I realized a few years ago, we had been married for, I think, 8 or 9 years, and we were struggling a little bit. Like, we definitely still 100%, the love was there. And what we realized was we were both, not to get too into it, but we were both trying to love the person we met as opposed to the person we had become. So we were both trying so hard, and we were missing a little bit because she had changed a little, I had changed a little, and we weren't trying to love the new person that each of us had become. So we have to remain curious as to what is going, like how your partner is changing. Remain curious about that, and remain curious as to what the solutions are. So thankfully, my wife is the embodiment of Curious George. She is curious about everything, and she sought out solutions for what we were going through. She sought it out, and we talked with a counselor, and it was fantastic. I mean, it made such a huge difference. And even to this day, she's so curious about how to express her emotions that she's feeling, and how do I tell Trey in a way that he's going to understand? And, even if she can't with her own words, she'll find a way, some other way. She'll maybe send me a reel on Instagram that is putting something in a way that she's been struggling to herself. And I think that level of curiosity has been absolutely huge for us. And I'll admit she's more curious than I am, probably because, she inevitably makes me a little happier by default than I make her. But, she's definitely better than I am.
Don't be so sure. Would she agree with that? What would she say? What would she say right now to that?
I think she would disagree, but I think it's just, we definitely both still have, we have that level of love for the other person that we both want to be better for the other person. So, I think we would both say the same thing in that respect. And it's not a self-loathing thing or anything like that. I think it's just, it's a desire to still be just a better person for the other, at any point. So, but yeah, I think the curiosity that she's had for finding the solution to any problem, issue, whatever you want to call it, has been huge for us. I mean, it's been absolutely monumental.
Yeah. And what's funny is you could also bring back to bring the conversation full oval is your curiosity, but then also, you basically kind of inadvertently talked about being adaptable.
Yeah. 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
So what's interesting, what's even more interesting is now you take this and you say, wait a minute. So are we coming to a potential conclusion that in order for me to be a better athlete, I can actually be a better husband, a better CEO, a better business owner, a better brother, a better son, father? And it's like, the answer is yes.
Yeah, because, absolutely.
One thing that I find fascinating, and I think it's because I think there's this huge stigma around mental health. it's huge because it's my battle is, I'll hear someone and I'm like, like Chase Sexton and I'm like, oh, like this guy, like I can help you. I know I can help you. And I've had to tame this side of me down like by about 90%.
Trust me, I have the I can help you vibe big time. Oh man, dude, I can do so much for you. Come on, just
yeah, I can get you on a cover. Come on. But yeah, but like you said, I mean, you know when you know, because it's like this is what you do. You can see things, and that's the beauty of what we do is we can see things that other people are looking at differently. And we see them in a way that we can hopefully bring light to shifting their perspective to maybe at least take a peek through our lenses. It doesn't mean you have to wear them, but at least peek, try these on and see. They're thick as hell.
But we're talking about adapting to things like track conditions or new bikes and new cars and stuff like that. I mean, adapting to how another human being is changing, that's challenging. In my experience, that's been a challenge. And I love this person. It's still not easy. And you hear a lot of people say like, how many times have you had, or have you seen the examples of a couple say, I love you, but you've changed? Well, no shit. Over a decade, everybody's going to change.
That's so true.
I mean, come on. So, you change. Well, duh. And Matt, so yeah, learn to love the person that they've become. And, some people may change for the worse. Some people may change for the better, blah, blah, blah. But when you break it down to that, man, adapting to a new track condition or, a few ruts getting a little bit deeper, it sounds so simple now, doesn't it?
It does. We should tag a couple maybe top 10 athletes, I don't know. Maybe, Federer.
Dude, go for it.
We can't
100%.
tag him. Djokovic's mental game is dialed. I follow him. If you guys want to idolize someone, I don't care what sport you're in. I don't care even if you hate tennis. Keep an eye on Novak Djokovic. You listen to his interviews, like he has got it. Very, very interesting. But, so what's interesting too, so I want to go back to what you just said is, you had said, well, hey, it might be a little tougher in a relationship, right? Is that not what you said?
Yeah, more challenging, I think. Like in a relationship, that's definitely a challenging thing to adapt to the fact that another human being is changing, their emotions are changing and things like that. Like that can be a challenge, even if you really love that person. Like I don't think it's a knock. I don't think it's saying that person's difficult or anything like that. It's just other people change, and you may have some expectation, right? You may have that expectation of what they are, what they should be, and then they may not match completely with that. So you have to adapt. So yeah, I think that is a challenge. And I think similar to there being a stigma on mental health, I think there's a stigma on, getting help in a relationship. And there's a stigma to, I think to a certain extent, to change, to being willing to adapt, especially for men. It's easy for men to get called, pansies or bitches or pussies or whatever you want to call it when they're trying to be a better husband for their wife or a better boyfriend for their girlfriend. I mean, yeah, that there's huge stigma there, which there shouldn't be. I mean, obviously that's what we should all be doing, and we should all be valuing our mental health. But unfortunately, there is that stigma there.
Oh, for sure. So, all right, let me challenge your narrative on having a spouse to adapt to them changing is hard. What if I want to see challenging. So what if I just gave you that one word, acceptance, and you injected it in that narrative? Does it change?
No, it's still a challenge because you can accept that they've changed, but then your behaviors have to adapt as well, right? Like acceptance is a key part of it. Like that's important, but then that doesn't necessarily mean that you can just then go about doing the same thing you've been doing for the last 10 years or whatever it is. Like there's still, what that person wants from you has changed. So even if you accept it, you still need to adapt. You still need to figure out how your behaviors need to change and adapt to help make that situation, make that partnership continue forward in a good way. So yeah, I think acceptance, you definitely have to. If there is no acceptance, you're fucked. I mean,
that's true. That is a fact.
That's step one, right? In any kind of
that is fact. All right, so let me ask you this: Is change hard?
Some change is, and some change isn't. Yeah.
What's the difference between hard and easy when it comes to change?
Well, I mean, there's always a scale, right? There's a spectrum of change, and some changes are easy to make, some changes are more difficult to make, and there's a lot of factors that can go into that. How deep rooted a habit is. Like, it's hard to break a bad habit, right? Especially if it's something that's been around for a very, very long time with you. It's doable, but it could be difficult. And then there are certain things that, maybe have more meaning to you than others, or certain things that have less meaning to you than others. Like, if my wife came home and she's like, I want you to park on the other side of the driveway, I'd be like, all right, done. Cool. No problem. Not a big deal. But if there's something that's more deep rooted to what I am as a human being, who I am as a human being, that's going to be a little bit tougher. I'm going to still try, unless I completely disagree with it. But
you mean to tell me, Trey, that you're the type of man that just lets your woman walk all over you?
Yeah, 100%.
And hence the reason why you're still married for 17 years.
You know what? You know why I let her walk all over me? Because she never would. So I married somebody who would never walk all over me. So I don't even have to make that decision.
I like that.
I don't even have to make that decision.
I love that, dude. That was like a knowledge bomb. There's some guy on YouTube. Whenever someone says something like this, there's a little bomb. You ever see that guy, Brad Leah, or something like that?
Oh shit!
No, it's not right now. This would be like a knowledge bomb. It'd be like a, and then be like boom, and then be silence for a little bit. I love that. Yeah, and what's interesting is you brought up a subject that is very powerful. That I'm shocked that people don't talk about this. I talk about all the time. Is what is the meaning that you give something? Because nothing has meaning until you give meaning to it. So your wife says, hey, I want to park on the left side and not the right side anymore. And literally it comes down to, well, what does that mean? And then also you can maybe go another step and say, and how important is it? Because it's kind of a function of both, right? Mm-hmm. If it means that you're this or that, or you're succumbing to a woman, whatever foolish thing someone could come at, that's one thing. But then you also have to add or stack on like the level of importance to that. So if you could just modulate meaning and importance, I mean, it's insanely powerful, just those two metrics. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think there are things that are, let me talk about it as an example. And she wouldn't do this, but if she ever came to me and she said, I don't want you being a business owner anymore. I don't want you doing this job anymore. I want you to stop. That's very meaningful to me, right? Like that's something that it has meaning and importance and purpose and value in my life. And that's a much different conversation than parking on the other side of the driveway, right? So the meaning and importance, that's something that, I don't know, it's almost like circular logic trying to define it.
What you're just talking about is so let me add this. When you gave that example, the first place my mind went as a mental performance coach is I said, now it's a difference from just taking a spot to changing your identity, your sense of self, your ego. Yeah. That is like the core, so that's like going for the core, and then what's interesting is someone could very easily in that case be like, well, if you love me, wouldn't you do anything? It's like, well, hold up. you want me to basically take my identity, which, and I actually struggled with this a little bit as well, because before the pandemic, I was a full-time eye doctor with a private practice. And now all of a sudden, I got my scrubs, I got my thing. I walk into here and there and everyone's like, doctor, 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 and then all of a sudden I was like, you know what? I'm done. And then like I went and I knew it was coming because I had a side hustle of being a mental performance coach. And I said, you know what, man, what would you rather, if you woke up tomorrow and you made the same amount of money, which job would you rather go to? And I couldn't finish the sentence, or the question rather. And I already had my answer. And I'm like, well, there you go. Yeah, but what was interesting is my sense of identity was my biggest challenge. It wasn't getting more clients. It wasn't, am I good enough? It wasn't, how am I going to help people? It was like, oh, wow. Because people would be like, wait, so you mean to tell me that you did something for 22 years, you spent $300,000 to get 2 letters and a dot in front of your name, and you're just going to let that go? And it was an identity crisis. And you see this with athletes that retire. And that's why you have to be careful, because if all you are is an athlete, all you are is a professional athlete, and you're nothing above and beyond that, then by default, who are you when you retire? You're nothing.
Yeah.
And that's a dangerous game. And that's why you see Michael Phelps, I don't know if you know this, but he struggled with mental health when he retired. And that's exactly why.
Yeah. And I've thought about that before, and it's, I don't know if this is odd or good or bad or indifferent or what, but it's actually something I don't relate to. I was an engineer for 10 years, and I had zero identity crisis when it came to switching careers. None whatsoever. I really loved engineering. I was having fun doing it. I somehow discovered this. I wanted to do it instead. And it was the same way where I could answer the question before I was finished asking it. If given the same amount of money, would I rather do this or this? And the answer was this. I make less money now than I did as an engineer, and I still love this a lot. I still love this. But there was no identity crisis. And I even had this conversation with my business partner, and it was like, he said, if you had to stop doing this tomorrow, what would you do? And I'm like, I don't know. I'd find something. It's just, I'd figure it out.
Figure it out. You'd find a way.
I'd find something.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, thankfully, I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if it's good, bad, indifferent, right, wrong. I don't know, but my identity has never necessarily been tied directly to what I do for a living. It is much closer connected now than it was when I was an engineer, I feel. I do find more of a sense of purpose doing this than I did in engineering, which I did. Again, we were doing contract work for the Navy. I had a very big sense of pride doing what I was doing, but not nearly as much of a sense of purpose as I do now with this. But at the same time, if our business was blown up literally, and we didn't have insurance or something, and we couldn't keep going, I'd find something to do. I'd be able to figure it out, and
you'd adapt.
I would adapt. Yeah. And not to say like, oh man, I'm this expert at adapting. It's what I would do.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because if you think about it, yeah, you anyone, and adapting, if you think about it, it's just, you find a way, it's like, well, what are we going to do? It's like, we'll find a way. Well, we're broken down in the middle of nowhere, find a way, and you just find a way. And I think sometimes we get so caught up in the how, especially as someone who's started multiple businesses and multiple digital businesses, so many people get caught up in the how, like think about losing weight. Like to me, if you want to lose weight, here, I got an idea, burn more calories than you take in, eat less and move more. Like, like, isn't that like, to me, that seems like it works. Maybe it's too simple. People can't even handle if it's
a pretty solid start.
Yeah, it's a good solid start, right? You know, there's more to it, obviously, but the more complicated you make things and the bigger they are, the more they weigh on your mind, the more they weigh on your shoulders, and the less likely you are to take action. So
it's why the phrase "making a mountain out of a molehill" exists.
Yeah,
exactly.
like
you're creating this mountain when really it's just this tiny little bump that all you got to do is step over it.
Yeah, it's so true.
And you're there, you're done. You're on the path. Like, it's literally just the start of the path. But yeah, it's very easy for us, because we all don't know what we don't know. And it's easy to make the assumption that we don't know something. It's easy to make the assumption that we don't know how to lose weight from where we're at. We don't know the process. So that's an easy cop out. It's an easy excuse, as opposed to being curious and going and seeking out what the solution is. It's easier to just be like, well, I don't know. I'll maybe consult somebody who does, and see what that's like, aka go to a personal trainer or go to a nutritionist. But then, they put another mountain in front of you of work, right? They say, oh, well, okay, it's going to take working out this many times a week and eating this diet or something like that. It's like, whoa, there's another mountain. But at the same time, you got to eat every day anyway, don't you? So why not eat something just a little bit different from what you've been eating? And you need to get from point A to point B. Why not add a few steps in between? It's when you break it down, it really isn't this mountain, but it's easy to make it look like one. And you probably know a lot more about that in terms of like how the human brain works and why that is. But it's easier to say, oh, I don't know. And then when you do go talk to somebody who does know, it's easy to say, well, that seems like a lot.
Yeah, and if you ever get a chance, I don't know if you've looked these up, but if you look up the cognitive biases, we talk about catastrophizing, we talk about generalizing, we talk about magnifying. And these are all very closely related, but slightly different. We even talk about mental filtering. There's a whole bunch of biases. There's like maybe 10 big ones, or I should say maybe 5 big ones, 10 primary ones, but there's probably another 15 after that of just these tendencies that the human brain has. And when you talk about self-compassion, it's nice to be aware of cognitive biases, because that's a tool I use to help people with self-compassion. I'm like, well, wait a minute. There's you, the human brain, your mind, and then there's you, the observer, and I always like to look at it as like, every now and then I try to observe myself. I try to get, and it's funny because I like to actually have a very precise, like, all right, I'm going to be about 6 inches above and like 3 or 4 feet behind. And I try to observe myself almost like remotely and be like, why did I respond that way? Why did I react that way? Is this a cognitive bias? Am I blowing this out of proportion? And we tend to minify our success, but magnify our failures. We tend to take one thing that goes wrong and make it bigger than it is. We tend to say, well, today, I woke up and you know what? The alarm didn't go off. And then after that, I had no coffee. And I was like, you know what? What's coming next? It's like, where do it's like, you got to be aware of that program running. And what's crazy is it's not even you. This is like human race. And so that's why the compassion is so easy when you start to dip into these cognitive biases, because you realize it doesn't matter whether you're black, white, tall, short, skin, like it doesn't matter your age. Like this is part of the human brain. And so that's a good tool for self-compassion. If anyone's looking to look into those, it's really powerful stuff.
I'm interested. I'm looking into it.
Yeah, I'll send you some stuff. So
I want to look up on that.
I don't want to be the reason that your 17-year-old relationship, turns into why were you home so late tonight? So before I let you go,
already told her I'd be home late tonight.
Like Jay,
already told her. I was like, man, I'm talking to Jay tonight. This is going to be a good chat. I'm putting time aside for it.
This is great. Here I was going to ask you about like different muscles and all this fitness stuff, and we just went we went down a whole different road. That's why I don't have any note cards. It was really I know when we got something good, and I think that this is going to be something that people are going to be very grateful for. So what I wanted to do to wrap things up, I wanted to hear from you, and we'll wrap it up with this, is when you look back on your career as a program director, a coach, a trainer, since you left being an engineer, what's like is there like a moment or a skill that you've trained, or was there an athlete? What's like that one thing that you look back that just fuels you, that you're just so proud of, and you look back and you're like, just that alone makes it all worth it?
Man, it's definitely more than one thing, but for one, I love seeing the guys and girls we work with succeed, have success. I love seeing them do what they do best and enjoying it. I want to see them enjoy it. I want to see them love it. I wasn't good enough to be a professional racing driver, but I love this sport and I want to do something that I wouldn't say has an impact, but that benefits the sport. And I love seeing my drivers succeed, but at the same time, one of the things that we have, I think, the opportunity to do in here is make drivers safer as well. We can make them more fit, but we can also make them safer. And that's a huge, huge motivating factor for me. And if it can be just one person that's less injured than they would have been in an accident, then, I've done my job, right? And I don't want it to be just one. Obviously I don't want people to get into wrecks on track, but I want there to be this notion of somebody's better off because they came in and worked with me. Somebody has enjoyed a better career or a better life, or just they're better off because they walked through my door. And that's what motivates me to get up every, the whole cliche, it motivates me to get up every morning and put in the work, all that kind of crap. I want people to be better off because they came in here.
I love that. Yeah, that resonates for sure. And it's interesting because as I was listening to, I also myself, like my left foot doesn't go up. It's paralyzed from a motorcycle accident. So I have nerve damage where my left foot doesn't go up. And so that killed my career in motocross, was, one of the things that did it. And so what's interesting is I think that we're on a very similar trajectory, because there's that part of me that's like, well, if I can't get my fix of being that guy, which I know I cannot, then how can I be the one that supports? And how can be that 1 degree of separation that gets someone where they need to go? And I think it's interesting how with a lot of people, your pain becomes your passion, and it really can fuel you, because it's so emotionally charged. So let me ask you this. If someone's looking to connect with you for either maybe some fitness advice, fitness tips, who knows, maybe some marriage tips, you might have a little side hustle going on here.
I'm not going to claim to be anywhere close to qualified to do that.
Yeah, but your results, man, you got results. That's like saying Eli Tomac can't give coaching advice because he's never coached before. Well, he's got the titles, he's got the numbers, dude. You got the results. 17 years. I'm sorry.
I got the results because my partner in the game is the best there is.
All right, I like that. We need to clip that and send it to your wife the next time maybe you park in a parking spot. But if someone wants to reach out to you, and I didn't ask you this yet. If someone wants to reach out to you, one, what's the best way to get in contact? And then two, are you just working with like professional athletes, amateur athletes, only motorsports? Or like, let's say that I'm in the, Charlotte, North Carolina area, or Cornelius, right? Isn't that the exact?
Yeah. So we're in Cornelius, which is just north of Charlotte. It's around the Lake Norman area. Okay. So basically it's kind of halfway between Mooresville, where most of the shops are based, and Charlotte itself, near the lake. And it's a good central location for the whole Charlotte metropolitan area.
So can someone that just wants fitness in general come to you, or no?
They can. Our prices might be a little bit high for what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. So we generally, right now it's all motorsports athletes. We work with a handful of drivers, and then also a couple of pit crews as well. And the same is the case up in Indianapolis. So we have worked with other athletes in the past, though. I've worked with softball players, hockey players, you know, so it's not exclusive to motorsports. Just obviously that's like the niche that we've built. So it's not necessarily that you have to be a driver, but that is our specialty. So I played baseball all through high school. So, you know, my love of and knowledge of baseball still exists a little bit. And it was fun to work with a softball player for a little while, especially on the neurocognitive side. But yeah, if somebody is looking to come in and get some training, though, they don't necessarily have to be a driver. But like I said, if it's general population, the prices might be a little high for what they're looking for. But if you're another athlete, then yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, myself and my coach Adam here, you know, we can take on other sports, no problem. That's not it's not a restricting thing for us.
I love it. How do we find you?
So if you want to get in touch with me, I'm at Trey Shannon on Instagram. That's usually the best way to get to me. But if you're looking for Pit Fit, we're at Pit Fit Inc. on both Instagram and Twitter, or you can go to our website, pitfit.com.
I like it. Dude, that was so much. We have to do this again.
Oh, 100%.
That was too easy.
Wait, you were planning on us doing this just once?
I will adapt. I will let go from my attachment of thinking that this is only going to be once, and I will adapt and we will do it again. And I will not focus too far in the future, but I will be present right now and will enjoy our current conversation.
100%.
But after the lights go out, I am going to think into the future about the next time we talk.
Sounds like a plan.
Trey, thank you so much for your time. That just went in a wonderful direction. I'm really excited to hear some of the feedback. I'm sure people are going to get some great nuggets from this. So thank you so much for your time and sharing some really, you know, powerful thoughts and topics that more people need to talk about. Thank you so much.
Dude, Jay, thank you. That was so much fun. I love it and can't wait to do it again.
All right. Sounds good, brother. We'll talk soon. Take care.
Awesome. Have a good one.